It's not. It's frozen.
What is it?
We will start in a couple minutes.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't realize this was going to the board today.
It's been good.
I just passed, see if we can get them to graduate.
Ellen, you and April asking others with football issue for money. There are two things that school PR people dread because it's like the busiest thing you could do, and that's a new website and a bond issue. I'm doing both of those things. I thought you said it wasn't going until January. There's sometimes though where there's things on here that they'll just skip over. So maybe they I don't believe that. We'll see. And the laws have gotten so cloudy recently with what you can and can't say. And I'm guessing it's the Did you want a piece of gum? No, thank you, thank you.
We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you can all stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will move on to item 3.03, Superintendent's comments. Mr. Seifert?
Thank you. Welcome everyone to tonight's Board of Education meeting. We're glad you have joined us. We have a few things. We have a lot to get to tonight too, so we're excited about this meeting. We're following the month of December, so I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I wish everyone a happy holiday season. May the winter break and the new year bring you great joy, health, and happiness as we move forward together. And we are after tomorrow down to 1 week before we take a nice break. Reminder, we've had detailed information already go out regarding our inclement weather, so our snow and AMI days. That's all going out to our staff and our parents. So make sure that we're all aware of that. And please note that we will use our 3 built-in snow days first, if needed for any inclement weather days that we have. And hopefully we are not going to see that at least until January, February. This past Wednesday, I just want to say we had a great morning. I want to thank you. Thank you. Hopefully people can hear me. Wednesday morning was a great morning. Board of Education, thank you for joining us. We had a tour. We had 3 of our elected officials with us in-house as well, and we got into about 6 of our schools. It was awesome. Just a great day to highlight the wonderful things that are happening across the SCSD, so that was awesome. Winter sports activities season is in full swing. This year's turkey tip-off was awesome. We were at the West Gym this year, and it was packed. Pirates and the Warriors, I think it was 2-2. We split the games. Just a great night for the community. And then also a special shout out. We're missing some tonight, but we had some great performing arts things going on in our department. So we've had choir concerts this week, orchestra concerts. We've had some fall plays that have been fantastic as well. So we've got a lot of really talented kids, and it's awesome to see them perform. Board of Education seats are once again up for re-election. And the candidacy window is now open. We have 2 board seats open up for election in April. We already have 2 people signed up, so we're excited about that. Then this evening, we have student achievement report, demographic report, an election resolution, which is a bond issue, defeasance resolution, 23-24 audit review, and the district financial report all tonight. So it's a big night, right, Mr. Shields? As I said before, winter break is just around the corner. Our last school day will be December 20th, will be an early release day. I just want to encourage all of us to finish the calendar year strong. I want to thank our staff for all that they do. They just do a great job for us. And we're looking forward to 2025 and moving forward together. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3.04, board communications.
We have none.
Okay. Item 3.05, audience comments.
All regular and special meetings of the board shall be open to the public. Since the board desires to be a good listener and be responsive to the community, persons desiring to address the board may do so during the time so allotted on the agenda and according to established procedures. During the audience portion of each board meeting, patrons are invited by the president to speak for or against any proposal on the tentative agenda or on any other school concern. The individual is asked to identify him or herself, limit comments to a few minutes, and avoid discussing personalities. The president reserves the right to limit the number of presentations and/or length of comments. At the discretion of the president, patrons may be recognized at other times during the board meeting. The board is very interested in audience comments. According to board policy, members cannot respond during the actual meeting. The board will listen to audience comments. If necessary, additional follow-up will occur through district administrators.
Thank you. We'll first hear from Teresa Linsnick. If you can just turn on your mic.
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, hi, I'm Teresa Linsnick, mom of a St. Charles High grad and substitute paraprofessional and cafeteria playground helper in St. Charles School District. I want to give a shout out to the special ed community at St. Charles School District, the parents, the teachers, the paras, and any staff helping kids in the SPED succeed. I work as a substitute para. Paras help children adapt to school life and help them do schoolwork. Being a parent has prepared me for working as a para. Paras must be patient, understanding, have wisdom, and see children's amazing potential even when it's a bit hidden. Kids in SPED have abilities, even if they look a little different than typical kids. Yesterday, I was with a child who just couldn't seem to concentrate on his schoolwork. Realizing that he may be a little competitive, I took out my phone, brought up the stopwatch, and told him I would time him. That seemed to do the trick. He concentrated on his math, and he wrote down the time it took to do it. So micro successes like these make working with kids all the more rewarding. Another day, I was on the playground, and when a boy bumped his head on a pole and got cut on his eyebrow, I took him to the nurse. Hours later, I saw him in the hallway. He said, "I just want to say thank you for helping me when I got hurt." And that just like melted my heart. SPED is where it's at if you want to see micro growth. If you know of anyone who is patient, has a heart for underdogs, and loves kids, please let them know about substituting as a paraprofessional. You can work as little or as much as you want, which is so cool, with being a substitute. And I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. I also want to thank parents, teachers, paras, and staff for the diligent work they do with special ed kids. And God bless us all this new year. And I just want to ask the Lord that we could help these kids and use and help them to just succeed in their ability, whatever that is. And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Brendan, have you come up next?
Good evening, my name is Brendan Kearns. I'm the president of St. Charles Education Association, the exclusive bargaining organization for certified employees and nurses in the district. Just wanted to start out by wishing everybody in the St. Charles community a happy and safe holidays. All of our staff is working hard right now to finish out their terms and get those kids to where they need to be. Also wanted to shout out a couple of our members. We had our fall conference last month. 5 of us were in attendance. Myself, Jessica Ross, Laura Lopez Reese, and Delilah Vandergeese all attended. Delilah and Jessica Ross both presented. Delilah on artificial intelligence prompts, and Jessica on the Leaders for Just Schools movement, of which she is a member. So thank you.
Thank you, Brennan. Item 3.06, is there a motion to amend or adopt the agenda as presented?
I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
I second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We will take a short break at this time, just a couple minutes, and then resume back in 2 minutes. Oh, if people want to leave, feel free. Now's your time to stay. You may all stay.
So, is that Dr. Seifrid's above the board, or is it the board above Seifrid? The board is above Seifrid. Okay.
So was coming up with last night at the Princess Teachers Night, and I came up to them, huge, it's a small tree, all decorated. And I heard this one little girl go, "So very sparkly."
That's you better get on it.
I know, I was like,
I'm telling you, they have a lot of feedback.
they can be brutal. Brutal. It's not very smart.
That's so funny. You better listen.
Okay. We will resume since it looks like most of you are staying. So item 4.01 is approval of the consent agenda. For efficiency, the school board utilizes a consent agenda. Items placed on the consent agenda are routine in nature or among the many decisions that the board has already determined are in the domain of administration. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. We will move on to item 6.01, which is the student achievement report. Oh, we don't have it back.
Dr. Draper is not here yet. I guess
He'll be here, yeah.
You guys just go through it real quick.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, it was on the track.
I mean, I did tell him we were having a.
He can jump in, let's just start.
Yeah, it's like.
No, these three
You all
are,
are
these
fully
three,
capable.
these three are awesome.
Oh, perfect time.
We're already started.
Sorry.
Yes, can you introduce me, please?
Madam Treasurer, thank you for joining us. We're the achievement report. The ladies are ready.
Well, thank you all for being here. Well, good evening, everybody. I thought I'd have a moment to.
No, you did not.
We kept it rolling.
So-
It's all their fault. Nobody laughed. We just
Everybody?
said, just kidding. We're ready.
All right, so let's go ahead and get going. So we are excited to present our student achievement report to you all today. Joining us for this evening's presentation, we have Dr. Jessica Rico. As you know, Dr. Rico is one of our curriculum coordinators who primarily oversees ELA and social studies. We have Caitlin Cromian, who's another one of our curriculum coordinators who primarily oversees math and science. And then introducing to you all for the first time this school year is Ms. Megan Bowersox. Megan joined us July 1, so she's just 6 months on the job and literally hit the ground running. She has been a great asset to our department, a great addition to our team. Data has been coming in slowly, as you know, over the past 6 months. And so she has been diving into that data, meeting with teachers and principals and building leadership teams to really start to unpack and unwrap some of the things that we are seeing. So with that being said, we are going to go ahead and present our student achievement report, but I don't know if my clicker is working. Okay, so what we have for you this evening, we will be going over demographic data, our annual performance report data, we have some celebrations, and then we'll talk about some initiatives that we are doing district-wide to continue to improve our outcomes for students. So when we look at our demographic data, you will see over the past few years, we've seen a slight decline in our overall student population. A celebration as we've seen our early childhood numbers continue to increase. We've also seen an increase in our students of color, our Black students, our Hispanic students, and as you all saw last month, we had a significant increase in our English language learners last school year as well. I do want to point out free and reduced lunch numbers. So if you look here, last year's data, we ended up with about 40% of our students who qualified for free and reduced lunch. This year, I believe we're trending around 45%. So we've bounced back to pre-COVID numbers. So these numbers here that you see from 2021, 2022, those are outliers, and they were outliers for a reason. And that's because during that time, pretty much everyone was receiving free lunch by the federal government across the country. And so people really did submit their forms. And so that's why we saw those numbers really low, and then we've rebounded since then. So 45% is about where we were pre-COVID. All right, let's go ahead and go to our next slide. So our annual progress report from the state. So you will see that in 2022, St. Charles School District, we earned a 77% on our APR. Last school year, the 2023 school year, we earned a 76%. And this year, we're sitting at a 76.7. So all of that information has been taken to create a 3-year composite. And so when you look at this number, you see 77.7, and the first thing you might see is this math is not mathing. This is not an average. And honestly, that's what I thought it was supposed to do. I thought it was supposed to be an average, the way it was originally explained to us. But essentially what the state did was look at all of our scores for the last 3 years. So all of the indicators of math, all of the growth achievement in math, all of the indicators for ELA, and then put those points together to give us our composite, which is 77.7%. In addition to that, one of the things that I recently learned is that the way they measured growth in 2022 is different from how they measure growth now. And so that's why we see a little bump over the last couple of years when they applied the metrics of today compared to with the points that we earned back then is part of the reason why our score is higher over the last 3 years, which we will take. We are excited for that 77.7%. So we are fully accredited from the state. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out is that next year when we receive our composite score, it will eliminate the 2022 data. So it's always a running 3 years. So next year, we would just look at 23, 24, and 25 data. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So how do we get those numbers? So 70% of our APR is based on student performance. And so we have a breakdown of student performance. 24% is student achievement. So that is proficient in advanced. It's also our MPI scores. So 16% is for all students, 8% is for our student groups. Just as a reminder, student groups refers to students who are historically underperforming. So those are African American students, our ELL students, students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, and our students with IEPs. So they are all grouped together in one group called student group. So 24% is based on student achievement. Another 24% is based on student growth. And so that's different under MSIP 6, is that student growth is now a component and it is weighted as equally as student achievement. And so that was designed to hurt some of those, to help some of those schools and districts where you might not be achieving, getting to that achievement status, but you are growing students. And then the other 22% of that is based on career readiness. So our students take what's called a college and career readiness assessment, which is worth 10% of that score. So those are things like ACT and SAT. That's also work keys, which is a career readiness assessment. The ASVAB, which is an armed forces battery assessment, or Accuplacer, which is another college readiness assessment. Our students in St. Charles School District primarily take the ASVAB. The reason for that is that the state dropped funding for this assessment a few years ago when everyone was taking ACT. Once the state dropped that funding, many districts started using different tests because ASVAB is free. That's what many districts in our area use, and so we use that as well. So we test all of our juniors, we give them the ASVAB test, and then if they are headed towards college on their own, their parents can take them to take the ACT, and many of our students take that as well. So that is what gives us our 70% of our APR. Student achievement, student growth, and then career readiness. We also have graduation rate and graduate follow-up also included under career readiness. The other 30% is based on continuous improvement, and that is essentially us telling our story, and I'll explain some of that a little later. So how we got those points? Where did our 76.7% come from? If you look at the breakdown, we saw that in ELA, we are on track as a district. We continue to be on track. We dropped a point in MPI, but we have pretty much kind of maintained at the in ELA. In math, we have increased slightly, but we are still trending on track in math. Science is the area where we saw a drop last school year. That did catch us by surprise because we have, over the past few years, seen an increase in science. And then this last year, we saw a drop in science. And so that's one of the things to my team. We're still trying to dig into all of the data to figure out what specifically happened that caused that significant increase in science this school year, this past school year. What did I say? Decrease, yes, in science this past school year. And so we've been working with our team to really dive into that data to get to the answers for you. And then in social studies, we also saw a slight drop in social studies this past school year. When it comes to academic growth, we are approaching for ELA for all students, and we are on track in our growth for student groups. In math, we are on track for all areas. In science, as I said before, we saw a drop in our science score, so we saw a drop in growth as well in science. And then in social studies, for all students, we are approaching with, for all student growth, and then for our student groups, we are emerging. Our college and career readiness, we are approaching in this category. I do want to point out something with college and career readiness. This score has not changed from last year, and that was done on purpose by the state. They held everyone's score the same. The reason is the state is saying that the reason why it has taken so long for them to give us APR scores is because they're waiting for college and career readiness assessment data to come in. So you think students can take an ACT test all the way up into, June, and so then that data comes in late, and they're waiting, so they can't release data until they get it. So this year they enacted a lag year, so it's the same exact scores that we got last year, and that was done intentionally by the state. Advanced credit, that refers to our advanced placement courses and our AP exams. As you can see, our students who are in the AP courses, they continue to score at the high level, and so we got all of our points there, so we are targeted for our AP credit. Graduation rate, while our graduation rate continues to improve every year, we're not at the target level, which is 92%. We're sitting a little bit above 90% as a graduation rate. Been a steady improvement over the past couple of years, but we're not quite there yet in order to get full points from the state. And then lastly, we have graduation follow-up. This should not be this score. It was a clerical mistake that we are owning. We had a registrar at one of our high schools that left mid-year, and as a result, when the new registrar took over, the graduate follow-up did not get sent out. And so as a result, we lost our points there. That won't happen again, and we've made sure of that with some systems that we put in place with the high school principals.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yep.
So we're going to see on the next slide too, just some percentages of the APR schools and the scope for the APR scores for the schools, and then obviously where we sit. And I can just say, I'll say it now, 77, okay, that's where we're at. There's no way in the world that this district should be in the 80s. The way we equate all of this and the things that we're doing in the school, and we agree as a leadership team, we need to be at least at an 80 and on. And if you look right now, and he's going to talk about that 30% continuous improvement, we own all those points. Those are points we have to get. But you take those 4 points from the grad follow-up, so that's not 4 percentage points, but it's about 2 percentage points. And then our graduation rate's right about 2%, and obviously, hopefully, the CCR assessments are only 5 out of 10, and our graduation rate's going up. You can very quickly see where we go up 5 or 6 percentage points, where we should be. And strategically, and what we're doing collectively, that's where we need to be. We need to be I'd love to be in the 90s, but right now, where we are with our achievement and our student growth, there's no way this district should be at least in the 80s. That's as a leader, that's put on my shoulders, and I know that we have the points already there. We just have to collectively make sure we get them.
Absolutely, absolutely. When we look at continuous improvement side, that's the 30% category. So we earned all of our points for our CSIP, and as you know, we're going through the process to rewrite that now, but we earned all of our points for CSIP. LEA response to standards, that's essentially us telling our story. We have narratives that we have to submit to the state to show how, to explain what it is that we're doing. And so we got all of our points on our LEA response to standards. We submitted a climate and culture survey to all of our stakeholders, and so we got all of our points there. KEA, that's the kindergarten readiness assessment that we give within the first 30 days per state law of kindergarten year. And so we received all of our points there. The ICAP, that is the career and academic planning program that we give at the 8th grade level to all 8th grade students. And so we received all of our points for the ICAP. Attendance, while attendance is growing, attendance is another area, if we can get to the target, that will help us out a lot. For a couple of reasons. You might think that's only 1 point, but I think more important than that is that the state expects us to have 90% attendance. And so as a district, we have increased over the past years. We were 81, 82. This year, we're right up sitting at 85% attendance. So that means 85% of our students are here 90% of the time. And so that's significant because to be below a 90% means a student misses 18 days of school. And so as a district, we have 15% of our student body has missed 18 days of school, which is pretty much an entire month. And so when we talk about student achievement, When we look at 15%, which is about 675 students, have missed an entire month of school. So missing an entire month of math, an entire month of science, an entire month of social studies can really start to impact students' overall scores. Especially at the high school, when we look at our high schools, St. Charles High, we were sitting at a 76%. So we have almost a quarter of our students who have missed 18 days of school. And those are things that we are working with principals on, developing plans to address and tackle attendance. Because I believe if we can start with attendance, while that's not gonna be a magic wand to fix everything, that's a step in the right direction, getting kids in the door and present in class every day.
But students cannot learn and they cannot go to high levels if they're not in classes. And kudos to you all, as we toured on Wednesday, a big part of this is our student clinic. Making sure families have access to a clinic that they can get kids help if they need medical help and get them back in school very quickly. And we have to make sure that it's a priority.
It is. Oh, next slide, sorry. Click one more time, please. All right, so here's our breakdown by building. We do have some celebrations that we do want to celebrate. We look at Knoll Elementary as the highest in our district. They have a 94.3% on their APR. Blackhurst has an 87.5%, and that's pretty significant because I want to point out that last year, Blackhurst was at a 39%, and this year they are at an 87.5%. That is definitely something to celebrate.
You know what I would say, we can clap for that.
We can clap for that. We're talking about our building with probably the most significant needs in our building when I refer to students who are free and reduced lunch, sitting at about 62% free and reduced lunch and 21% ELL population. So great job to Blackhurst. As we know, Lincoln continues to be at the top. They consistently have high achievement scores year after year after year. Monroe is another school that we want to celebrate, coming from the low 70s over the past 2 years to an 86.8% last school year. Hardin is a school that continues to turn it around from the upper 60s to now 80%. We've seen just increase in attendance at Hardin, we've seen an increase in student achievement, and we've seen a decrease in inappropriate student behavior at Hardin. So kudos to the things that are happening there. Also kudos to Harris. Harris Elementary saw a 9-point increase from 70% last year to 79.3% this year. And then there we are as a district. And then we know we have some work to do in some schools. We've met with all of the principals. We have worked with their leadership teams. We've heard their plans for improvement, and all of our principals have really aggressive plans to, one, maintain the growth that they've received this past year, or to increase their student achievement. We know that 5th grade continues to be an area that we watch as a district. That is a tough transition, and Jefferson has a lot of initiatives in place to really tackle that and confront that head on. And same with St. Charles High School.
And for us to show this slide is not to pick another school, but we need to show the data. And the greatest thing is our building principals, our leadership in our buildings, as well as our staff, they own the scores. And we're having really, really good conversations, our staff are with our leadership teams, on what does it look like to get, as Earl said, either stay where you're at a high level, or how are we raising those achievement scores. And I really feel great about how we're owning where we're at. And the great thing is, the good news is, I just told you, there's points out there that we can get. Mm-hmm. And we have a Blackhurst that went from the 30s to the 80s in 1 year. So it can
be done, absolutely.
And when we talk about the growth at Hardin and Monroe and Harris, there's really good things happening. We know our other schools that might be at this point a little bit lower in terms of an APR school. I know we're gonna get there. And again, that 80%, just look at that. 6 out of the 10 schools are already at that 80 mark. It's 79.3, I think, or above. And I just said, if we are above that 80 mark, that's where we should be. 6 out of 10 are there. We're not far away, but we can get there.
Thank you. So Megan's going to come in and actually talk to us about the student achievement data and what that looked like for this past year.
Yeah. So what you'll see is a series of 3 slides for each of our core content areas. The first 2 slides take a look at the district scores in that content area at an aggregate look. And we like to look at this kind of data because it does give us a representation of our district's performance on that subject as a whole. And then the third slide in the series will show you more of a disaggregated look at where each grade level is performing with that content area. So here you can see that over the past 3 years, our students in English language arts as a whole have gradually declined. So what you'll see on this slide that looks like this, the top kind of chart or top category is your all students. And then the one in blue below that is specifically our student groups. So a positive on this slide, a couple of them, are that we are on track despite the decline for our all students. And we are increasing, at least over the past 3 years, the outcomes for our student groups in English language arts. Even though you can see on that top all students chart, it does look like a decline. Overall, it's just a negative 2.4 points on NPI, which again, NPI is just the total scores that students earn divided by the number of students who take the test, and it gives us an idea of where our students are scoring in terms of proficiency levels. So if this scale was bigger, you wouldn't even really notice the decline. It is something that we are paying attention to though, and it is noteworthy, but so far not necessarily something of a major concern. This, for English language arts, is a comparison of, again, SCSD as a whole and English language arts compared to the state. The first 2 columns show you all students compared to the state, and the second 2 columns show you our student groups compared to the state. I know there's a lot of information on these slides, but what I really want to point your attention to when you see slides that look like this, where Dr. Draper's got the pointer, when you see SCSD 5.3% greater than Missouri, anytime on these following slides that you see blue, we are doing better than the state in terms of student percentage, or percentages of students scoring proficient or advanced. When we see that text in red, it means that we are performing in terms of proficient or advanced below the state average. So for all students, we are scoring higher than the state. More of our students are proficient or advanced, which is wonderful. And even better, our student groups are doing 7.7% better than the state. So even though we have declined slightly over the past 3 years, our students in ELA as a whole are still performing, pretty well compared to the state averages. Now this is where we get a little bit of a disaggregated view to see really where we have some strengths and then where we might have some areas that we might need to develop and work with those teams. So when you see a star next to, again, that middle column or middle set of text is really what you're going to want to focus on. The stars are a pretty significant improvement of our students over the state. So you can see that 3rd grade, we had 9% more students scoring proficient or advanced over the state. 4th grade, we had 11% more students than the state. And then another win would be 8th grade, ELA. We had 9% more students proficient or advanced in the state. The 2 areas in red where we were lower than the state were 5th grade, as Dr. Draper mentioned a little bit ago, and our English 2 scores, those EOCs at the high school. Our students, we had 3% fewer scoring proficient or advanced than the state. Now we're on to math, again, as a whole district, looking at our MPI. You can see growth for both all students and our student groups. It is, even though it's a gradual increase for our students in math, it is still marching toward that target score. And our student groups, again, 3.1 and then 3.1 again, that's a steady increase over time. When we compare our students overall, their performance in math to the state, you can see that we had 7.5% more students scoring proficient or advanced overall in math in the state. And our student groups, once again, were even higher. 9.2% more of them performed proficient or advanced than the state average. And then when we start to look at grade levels to see really what is happening at that level, we can see that fourth grade, once again, they were 14% higher in terms of proficiency than the state, students proficient or advanced. And then our Algebra 1 scores were quite high as well. 13% more students were proficient or advanced in the state. One thing to note though, when you're looking at the 8th grade compared to Algebra 1, you definitely need to be aware that Algebra 1 scores reported here also represent the 8th graders at Hardin that took the Algebra 1 EOC. So just note that the students who took that test at Hardin did very well. Their scores really boosted these Algebra 1 scores. But when we look in red, we can see that 8th grade math was, in terms of proficiency compared to the state, lower by quite a bit. And then we also have 5th grade scoring, 5% fewer students scoring proficient or advanced. Science, we start to see some drastic declines in student performance. 12.4 points decline for all students and a 17.5 decline for our student groups.
And as, if you go back to 1 second. So as I was saying before, we have been seeing an increase in science over the past couple of years. And then this past year is where we saw that sharp decline. And so that's one of the things that we are still trying to dive into to figure out what is the cause of that. Is this an outlier year, or do we have bigger problems that we need to address at a district level? And Caitlin's going to talk a little later when we get to science. We've already had some ideas, and she's already been working with some things since the summer with science in general that we'll speak to. But this is still definitely an area of concern for us to see this drastic of a decrease in one school year, which has not been our historical trend in science.
When we compare all students to the state, again, in science as a whole, we were just barely beneath the percentage of students proficient or advanced in the state. And then our student groups were just barely above the average percentage of students proficient or advanced compared to the state. So even though it's a drastic decline for our district, it's really tracking along with what the state is seeing as well.
Yeah, the state also saw declines in science and social studies, not as significant as the decline that we saw, but there was a statewide decline in science and social studies.
And then we just wanted you guys to see the three different, this is again different from ELA and math. As you know, when we look, our sample size is smaller because we only have 3 grade levels who take this test. And I also want you to note that when we look at this data, we know we've seen that 5th grade has been consistently performing below the state. And so it's not a surprise if here in science, there are also fewer students proficient or advanced. And then we also have our biology students taking that EOC at the high school. We had 4% fewer students scoring proficient or advanced than the state average on that test as well. We were 2 percentage points, 2% above the state average in 8th grade, which is good.
We can still, we can do that.
Okay, and then social studies. Another decline, as Dr. Draper said, the state has also seen a decline. Ours was 8.7 point drop for all students, and even more so 12.2 for our student groups.
And I will say, before we jump out of that real quick, social studies, unlike science, social studies, we have seen a steady drop in social studies. And so Dr. Rico is going to talk a little later, but we just rewrote the social studies curriculum last year in an attempt to fix this decline that we've seen. And so she's going to talk about some of the work that they've done. And this is year 1 of implementation of that new social studies curriculum. So we're hoping that we will see a reverse trend in social studies. Keep in mind, when we talk about social studies, we're only talking about a very small sampling of students. We're only talking about those students who take government, but nonetheless, it's still a decline in our scores over the past few years.
Can I ask something real quick, Earl?
Yeah.
Yeah, Megan, and I was just kind of curious, if we're looking at these indexes here, is there any concern as we're looking at, I know a lot of the times the student groups, as they're having bigger numbers and jumps, we see the overall student go up just a little bit. So is that basically saying that our overall, like the students that are already at that level are pretty much stagnant? Is that what we're saying? Are we still having that same, are we concerned about that growth as well? Because we see those numbers, and I'm thinking maybe the student groups are bringing those numbers up just that little bit of increase. So I guess my concern would be, are we focused in on those students as well? Because I'm concerned that if we don't hit those students, then that might end up going the opposite direction.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
No, I think it depends on the content area that we look at, because that is an excellent point and definitely something that our team has been talking about. We know that those historically underperforming students, they get us, they are a priority for a reason. They get us honestly more than 1 point. And not just that, that's not the only reason why they're important. But we really do need to be prioritizing every child's learning, but especially those that are historically underperforming.
Which is why our tier 1 curriculum is so important. What we do at the tier 1 level is important. We have multi-tier systems of support. As Dr. Seifer will say, our big rock is RTI. And so we definitely want to move those kids who are at the bottom. But our tier 1 supports, our universals are for all of our students. We want to see all of our students grow. When we talk about student growth, it's not just for student groups. Student growth measures every student in our district. So if you were a student in our district, you would get assigned a growth score for you. Jeremy would get assigned a growth score for him. I would get assigned a growth score for me. So we want all of our students to grow and grow at high rates. Yeah.
And we talked too about the strategy of it in a couple of different ways. So it's not just knowing the content of what they're studying or what they're going to test on, but how can they apply it at different levels to it and how they're performing on an actual test. The other thing is owning their scores, owning the process, especially at our secondary level. Now we have a little bit of 5% maybe that's part of their grade for EOCs, I think. They just changed that.
That's changing for this year.
So they changed that back a little bit, so we have a little bit of more stock in the test, but there's a whole part of that of just making sure that we're owning that and being very intentional about what we're doing with our kids taking those tests. And that's everybody. That's a whole group you're talking about, not just
everyone. Thanks, Ryan. Next slide. So celebrations, we do have some things that we want to celebrate as a district. If we can go to the next slide. So as we talked about earlier, graduation rate we've seen a steady increase in our graduation rate over the past 3 years. Attendance rate as well, we've seen a steady increase in our attendance rate over the past 3 years. We saw significant growth at Blackhurst, at Harris, Monroe, Knoll, and Hardin, which we talked about earlier. We have seen a slight increase in our overall math scores. And then our student groups, we saw an increase in ELA and in math for our student groups. And then as you all saw, the U.S. News released their top schools in Missouri. Hardin is in the top 5% of all middle schools. And I believe out of 1,450, they're in the top 5% of middle schools in the state. And then out of almost 1,800 elementary schools in the state, Lincoln is number 8. So pretty incredible recognitions there. We also have other achievements that we want to celebrate that our students have accomplished. We had 101 students earn Adobe certificates. We had 133 students at Lewis and Clark who received industry recognized credentials. And we had 22 students at our high schools who earned their seal of biliteracy. And then as we know, in just this past February, we celebrated Lincoln because they were National ESEA Distinguished School Award recipient. When it comes to our ACT, we have relatively stayed the same. We saw a slight increase from 2024 to from 23 to 24, but we've relatively kind of flatlined when it comes to our ACT scores. We also have 36 AP scholars in our district, 11 scholars with honor, and then we have 4 scholars with distinction. So what are some things that we are doing district-wide to really start to address
student achievement to continue to put us on the track where our students are performing. As you know, we are in the process of rewriting our CSIP. We have pretty much sent the work to subcommittees at this point. So as a steering committee, we have identified 3 pillars, which will be the basis for our plan: academic excellence, culture, and resources. And so for the next 2 months, we will be gathering in small groups to really start developing SMART goals and strategies and action plans that will carry our district over the next few years. And then we've been working with curriculum as well to really tackle this. And so this is where the coordinators are going to talk about specific work that they are doing with our building, leadership teams, and with teachers to improve student outcomes.
Hi, everyone. So starting with math curriculum, we're currently, we're in the early stages of a 2-year K-12 math rewrite. So they've had 2 meetings so far, and we'll have next school year as well. We have the rest of the school year. And this is our first time writing, well, kind of second time writing. Threw a little wrench in it, but approaching a K-12 curriculum rewrite. It is really an exciting opportunity to think about systemically vertical alignment and being able to have K-12 teachers in a room making decisions for learning outcomes in the district. And some of those decisions revolve around Missouri priority standards. So 80% of the map in the EOC assesses Missouri priority standards. There's supporting standards as well, which are essentially building blocks to the priorities. And so we've been on a journey of using the priority standards as a foundation in our curriculum. And so the curriculum writers have so far started that work of laying out the priority standards as the foundation, as the glue that holds everything together. And a few resources that they're using to guide themselves, to guide them is the item specifications. So those give them more clarity about what students need to know and be able to do. One of our goals as a curriculum writing committee is teacher clarity and visible learning. And so we've been on that journey. There's been a lot of conversations about what do kids need to know and be able to do for this standard and clarifying that as a team. We've also, as we've taken on that standards literacy component and vertical alignment, we're also going to approach assessment literacy later in the process. We've added assessment writing to our curriculum writing process, so that will allow us to come together, write the assessments as a curriculum committee while we're all together and align it to our curriculum. During assessment writing, we'll really have an emphasis on rigor, DOK, and ensuring that our assessment is using various item types and it's assessing essentially similar to how our students are going to be assessed on the map in the EOC, asking ourselves, are we assessing them the way they're being asked to respond? And so some teams have already, we have an amazing group of teachers. Some teams are already thinking about what they can implement now. With that, with our standards literacy, we've also spent time looking at the grade levels below us and the grade levels above us. So a big component is knowing where kids are coming from. What did they learn before me? And what are they learning after me? And how do we ensure vertical alignment? So we systemically decrease gaps within our learning outcomes in our system. So standards literacy and assessment literacy has been a huge component in the curriculum writing so far. We've only met twice. They've gotten a lot of work done. Vertical alignment has been one. And systemic impact, we really want to think about the entire K-12 system. And collaborative culture has been a big piece. We have teachers from every single building, K-12, on the committee. It's really a great representation of every building has someone that they could walk up to and say, what have you all been working on? And that could speak to the work. Along our journey, we will eventually talk about instructional resources for teachers to use as well in the classroom. That is the curriculum writing committee. I've got a lot of committees circling around, you guys. Another one is the math steering committee. So this is a smaller group of curriculum writers. They're also on the curriculum writing committee. They're really thinking about what do kids need to know and be able to do on the curriculum writing committee. On the steering committee, they're really thinking about dispositions. There is a math proficiency rope with 5 strands, 2 of them being procedural fluency and conceptual understanding. So when we talk about priority standards and we talk about what kids need to know and be able to do, we're really talking about conceptual understanding and procedural fluency, the math piece. But there are 3 parts of the math rope, which is strategic competence, adaptive reasoning, and productive disposition. That is another component to being proficient in math. So there's a math steering committee with a smaller group of teachers from curriculum writing who are writing transfer goals for the district. Meaning, what are the goals, whether you're in kindergarten, 3rd grade, 7th grade, 12th grade, no matter what, as a system, what are our transfer goals for students long-term to ensure we're getting towards strategic competence, adaptive reasoning, and productive disposition, all things that will greatly impact them outside of school, on the MAP test and the EOC. It will benefit them just as a person. So we've been going on that journey. We haven't made any decisions. They've met once. And so we've really just looked at data so far. So we've got a curriculum writing committee really unpacking priority standards, and we have a math steering committee collectively unpacking how will we help students be mathematicians, essentially, and what will that look like from kindergarten to 12th grade. We have an amazing group of teachers all dedicated to the work. It's really, if you come in on those days, beautiful talking and collaborating and bouncing ideas and challenging each other and pushing our mindsets. And every time they leave, I'm just really thankful for that group. So those are that's our 2 committees for the math curriculum, and we are on a 2-year timeline, and we've only met twice, so the process is just getting started. As far as science, my other committee, I'm just doing committees apparently this year, is the Science Steering Committee. So this is an opt-in committee right now for high school teachers. I started with high school. There's a lot of initiatives right now on our elementary buildings. And so right now we're starting with our high school science teachers. The committee is comprised of 9 teachers, an administrator, and an instructional coach, and myself. I am co-facilitating with the high school science instructional coach, but it is really a teacher-led process. So the intent for the committee is to come together and collaboratively unpack 3-dimensional science teaching and assessing. So their standards are 3-dimensional. They have disciplinary core concepts, essentially the content, right? The science content. They also have science and engineering practice standards and cross-cutting concepts. And when you actually open their item specs, there's a section for all 3 of those. So sometimes I'm like, wow, they really have 3 times standards. So we're going on an opt-in teacher action research process to unpack the most effective way to teach and assess 3-dimensional science and measuring our work. So we are also in the beginning stages. They've set a goal. They co-created a goal as a group of teachers. We're still outlining action steps and what data do we want to bring back to show that what we did worked for kids and improved kids' outcomes in the classroom. It's again an amazing group of teachers. It always feels good to leave those days. And we're also in early stages, so all they've come up with is a goal, and it is them leading the work. And it's another collaborative approach, really moving together, all of them moving together towards the same goal, which is pretty neat. We have a chemistry teacher, physical science, biology, everyone is represented, and we're all owning and sharing the same goal. So that will be a really, it would be nice to have that same North Star, thinking like this is high school science. I might be chemistry teacher and I don't give the bio exam, EOC, but we're really thinking about science as the bigger picture. And those are really my two updates for math and science with that lens of thinking about standards literacy and creating space for that learning and that improvement.
Hi, everyone. I know you have a long night ahead of you, so I'll try to keep this short. ELA and social studies. I'm going to start with social studies because it's going to lead into the ELA piece. We just rewrote social studies last year. We're in our first year of implementation for the secondary levels. Currently, I am rewriting with our 5 and 6 grades, and then over the summer, we're going to finish writing up with the K through 4. What we've done is taken the skills for social studies, which are the priority standards. So basically, you're looking at how to apply a certain skill of analysis, inference, to not just dates, etc., but being able to tell a story with history so that students can critically think through application. What does this look like in real life for them? So understanding that our government scores are definitely not where we want them to be. Please understand we are in the first year of implementation for that, and I have also brought in Dr. Rhett Oldham, who is the new DESE Social Studies Director, and he spoke directly with our social studies teacher, told them exactly what they need to focus on for the EOC, is giving them strategies and techniques of how to assist their students to better understand how to approach the government EOC, and working with Leslie Teague, who is an instructional coach at St. Charles High and St. Charles West, to help improve those scores as well. So I guess hold tight on that, but at the same time, I do also want to link that into ELA. Literacy is such a huge part of our social studies as well, and you will notice, if you look at the standards, the priority standards for social studies, you will notice that they mirror quite a bit of what you're going to see in ELA. A lot of inferencing, analysis, and synthesis as well. So I want to focus on what was said before, is that slight decrease in our ELA. As an 11-year veteran English teacher at St. Charles High, nothing makes me more upset than to see one child not be able to read or write properly, communicate properly, because that is the backbone for how they're going to learn. With that said, last year, the Board of Education, thank you, allowed us to adopt a new resource and gave us the approval for our new curriculum that we wrote, which is based purely on the standards, directly as they are stated in the Department of Education standards database. I also want to mention that we have discussed standards literacy, and I want to tell you just a little bit about what that means. When a teacher looks at a standard, or anybody looks at a standard, we want them to know exactly what the standard is asking the student to do and what the standard is asking the student to do that to. So, in other words, if they're asking the student to infer about a text, we want teachers to know, what does infer mean? What does it look like? And that's the visible learning. We want them to know, what does that look like to what text? Nonfiction, fiction. That's what we're talking about with standards literacy across the domain, across all of our content areas. So what we've done with the K-6 implementation this year, I've spent the bulk of my time this semester in the elementary schools and our intermediate school. And I will tell you, I just looked at the iReady data, our benchmark data for K-6 today. I had goosebumps because we have significant growth for those children in reading from the beginning of the year. We started with professional development on August 16th. It has been a heavy lift on our teachers, and we thank them so much for all of the work they are doing, but it is paying off. And if you get a chance, and I'm more than happy to invite you in, and please just go in to these classrooms and watch these children answer questions beautifully. I'm going to give you a brief example. We were in a 3rd grade classroom at Lincoln Elementary, and this is not uncommon. The students were studying a Jacques Cousteau book because it was a nonfiction text they were looking at. They were looking at text features. That was one of the standards that the students need to look at. Text feature is basically that little, like a box with some information in it on a text. And there happened to be a little circle with orange, and in that orange circle was talking about the keyhole on a ship. And the teacher asked a student, what exactly is that little orange circle? And the student said, well, that's a text feature. She said, thank you. He said, can I expand on that? This was a 3rd grader. That 3rd grader proceeded to say that perhaps the keyhole wasn't just the actual keyhole for the ship, but the keyhole to adventure. This is not atypical for what we are seeing across the board. I want you to go in these classrooms. I want you to see this beauty that is happening. So that's for our K-6 students. We know that the challenge lies as well at our secondary level. I need to start with the base first. Now that we've done that, we've set the stage, we have created a true standard-based platform for our K-6. Now it's time to take a look again. What are we doing at the secondary level? What I plan on doing now is bringing our secondary teachers to take a look at what our elementary teachers are doing in the classroom so that teachers know, okay, this is how our students are being prepared now, so that we know what changes we may need to make in the future going forward. I'm also going to take the teachers through continuous unpacking of the standards, that's standards literacy, so that they completely understand what their standards mean. That's what we do during our curriculum refresh over the summer, so that they can then apply those tactics and those implementation strategies in that following year, and that continues to cycle through right up until 3 years from now when we do the K through 12 rewrite all together. So the intent and the goal and the mission is that through all of this, and I'm not standards literacy, but literacy in itself, that teachers in ELA and social studies are able to use those skill standards more effectively so that our students are achieving and being able to apply, and that naturally those standard scores are higher. Thank you.
Okay, it's me again. So for Assessment for Learning, you've heard about all the wonderful things that my team, that we are working on to help our students achieve these high standards that the state has set, but then also that we know that they're capable of achieving. One of my primary goals, both as an educator and an instructional coach in this role, is to help people consistently know thy impact. And I cannot take credit for that quote, even though I would like to. I have to credit John Hattie, who's one of my favorite researchers and writers about education. But again, every conversation that we have about student learning should be for educators to evaluate our impact on the students. And so the vehicle that I am really working with the buildings on to know thy impact is through PLCs, which is a practice that we have had consistently across the district. What we're doing is just working with each building to make sure that those programs and those systems are shored up and solid. And so as we go through that, we've got buildings in different places with this process. So just know, just like in the classroom, we know that we have variability in terms of where each building is, and just we are absolutely comfortable as a team personalizing our approach with those teams, because we want to make sure that we honor them as distinct bodies in different places, and we have plans to work with each of them to achieve these goals. So again, the vehicle for Assessment for Learning is through our PLCs. As you probably know, we have already had iReady in place for at least a year, well, 1 year. And this year we rolled out a new personalized intervention tool for iReady, which is MyPath. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And we also rolled out a brand new benchmarking system for our secondary schools. So these two benchmarking assessments help us get a grip on where students are at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and again, end of the year, before our math testing or ESD testing. They give us an idea of where students are at in relation to end of year or end of course learning outcomes. And as you know, we are big about using that data in the PLC model to ask the question, what do our students know? And how are we going to help them get there? Well, this helps us understand where our kids are at. It helps us to look at, before we start teaching any kind of learning or standards, we can look at that data and say, what is our students' readiness for this learning? What are the gaps that we might need to fill before we get to instruction? Our PLCs are then also looking at the data in terms of how our students are performing on those standards that we're working on right now. And what are the supports that students will need to fill those gaps to be able to access that grade level curriculum? Because we don't want to lower our standards. We want to make sure that we are helping students achieve those standards. And these personalized options through MyPath and IXL are helping us do that. So our PLCs are working together, and especially starting in January, we'll be having our middle of the year data analysis process, and we're working with every building to ensure that their PLCs are not just looking at this data and having conversations about student learning, but specifically targeting students for that intervention that's already happening, but just tweaking their processes, evaluating the impact of the intervention that's existed, and just really identifying students who need that extra support to be successful on our end of year testing. So that's really where we're going. I know we have other plans as a department to support increased standards literacy, and as we get into that standards literacy, we will also, then the next step would be to build more solid, firm assessment literacy that's grounded in best practice, that's grounded in helping every kid achieve high learning outcomes. But first, we're going to focus on that standards mastery and then get buildings gradually to that increased assessment literacy. So, questions?
And so as Megan said, we are in the middle of the year assessing right now for iReady and IXL. Most of our elementaries should be wrapping up this week, and I believe secondary
Everyone should be done by next week.
Yes, because we, of course, it's the semester is over next week, so we should have that data in its entirety when we come back from break. But as Jessica pointed out, we have seen some preliminary iReady data, and that preliminary iReady data is pretty good across the district, showing some significant growth and achievement for our students.
I have a question.
Yes.
The wit and wisdom. I was very excited about that. I like the idea, the freedom to learn, the freedom to teach. It kind of expanded horizons a little bit in terms of subject matter. And I was wondering how much with the social studies, how much you can integrate some of that ELA into, in social studies and make it more interesting to the students.
Yeah, so that is the plan.
Yeah, I was so excited about that when I first, and a critical thinking comes into play there. And anyhow, I'll let you answer, but how are you using wit and wisdom?
I'm speechless simply because I'm thinking about a module in grade 4. It's called The Red Coats Are Coming. Mm-hmm. And it infuses fiction and nonfiction and as well as classical art pieces to demonstrate history through a literary lens. So students will be exposed to a variety of social studies standards as well as ELA standards, and that's just one aspect of it. But currently, the work that we are doing with I will be doing with the K through 4 group is aligning what is already available for them in Wit and Wisdom, because there is quite a bit rich text that's already there and available for teachers to use, and to be able to support those skill standards that are K through 12 that we developed for social studies. So it will be using Wit and Wisdom as well as maybe some other supplementary resources that Wit and Wisdom may not completely fill for a primary document perspective, but that teachers will be able to use. So it's not just like, okay, well, here's ELA. Oh, by the way, we're going to do social studies too. The idea is that we're infusing them together because they do go hand in hand. A really great conversation I just had as well, this leaps into high school, was this conversation that I had with an ELA teacher yesterday, and we were talking about the standards. And she was looking at the social studies skill standards that we developed or we put together from the priority standards from the state, as well as the ELA standards. She goes, why aren't we doing more collective work? And I said, I'm so glad you said that. So I believe that you're going to see more of that as we go forward. And yes, that is my plan, is to infuse as much wit and wisdom so that the load is not on the teacher and that the students see the significance of ELA and literacy across the content areas.
And I know there's been a little bit of a struggle. It's one of those things that's such a big change. And, it's not like you've been given exactly what you're going to teach, exactly what you're going to assess. And I just wonder if you'd address that a little bit, or where you're at.
Yeah, so it has been a struggle. So you have to keep in mind, we had our previous elementary ELA curriculum for 14 years in this district. And so a big undertaking like that requires time for people to get more comfortable and familiar with. So we have some growing pains when it comes to that. But we met with with SEA recently, and even feedback from them is that things are getting better. People are getting more comfortable. Talked to principals and instructional coaches last week in their respective meetings, and that's been the message that I've heard kind of across the board, is that as people are getting more and more familiar with the setup and how Wit and Wisdom is laid out, people's comfort level is improving and their confidence is improving. And I think once they see the student data, that will also help as well.
I will also say too, I have teachers reaching out to me now to come see their classroom. because they're excited to show what they're doing. They're also reaching out to our communications director, Vicki Plummer-Shepard, so that she can capture what's happening in their classroom, because we started doing that. So if you're looking at our Facebook page routinely, you'll see these beautiful examples of wit and wisdom. Again, nothing says it more than when you can come and see it with us and experience this beauty, because there's nothing that speaks more volumes. Data is wonderful, but a child is the true evidence of what is working.
Well, thank you. And
Absolutely.
I would, guess that your little story about the keyhole, which I have no idea, might have been a result of the wit and wisdom.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we actually
Thank you.
And so, absolutely. And the beauty is too, the students are, they're excited. It's so adorable to see their little faces. So thank you.
More questions?
I have like 1.5 technically.
Okay.
First off, saying every time the department comes and talks about curriculum and the stuff that's going on, all you can feel is the passion and excitement, and it's palpable. It makes me excited. And there's just great stuff going on all of the time. You can see it in the student achievements and everything else we're working on. And I know it starts a lot with what you all are doing, and it's fantastic. And appreciate you for it, and all of our teachers. You addressed a lot of it with how we could get above 80 already with some of the stuff. What do you think of all of the goodness? What's like the one big thing that will make the most difference?
Standards literacy, that is the big, maybe I shouldn't have spoken on their behalf, but that is the big goal for our department, is standards literacy, is helping teachers understand what it is the Missouri Learning Standards are actually asking our students to be able to do.
And that basically.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, to that point, that's basically why you just said it a lot smoother than I could. But then all three have talked about the application piece and making sure that the kids can perform at a certain level. And that we talk about, and I'm gonna let, because she can say a lot better than I can. But that's the piece we're talking about. Go ahead, Megan.
Well, to piggyback off of that, yes, we want teachers to have clarity and of understanding what it is that these learning outcomes are, because you can't hit a target you can't see. But I'm our whole team is passionate about students need to see it too.
Yes,
absolutely.
And students need to have agency in achieving that, and parents and stakeholders, you guys need to be able to see it as well. And so I would say our team would probably say, yes, we want teachers to know what the learning outcomes are, but then we need the students to know as well.
That's that ownership we're
I was
talking
gonna say,
about.
that's the ownership piece that Dr. Siefer said earlier.
Yeah, it's well said.
Last one, where does our APR of 77.7 kind of compare to the rest of the county or area?
So I don't want to give out other district scores because I don't know if they've shared it with their board yet.
Fair.
I will say, when it comes to the St. Louis region, we are at the top of the bell curve. You think about a bell curve, we're at the top of the bell curve when it comes to the St. Louis region. When it comes to our county, we're at the bottom of our county.
Thank you.
But without saying scores, our county is a very high county when you look at across the state of Missouri. We're a very high achieving county.
Yeah.
But again, we own it. There are points out there we can still get, and then when you talk, these three talk to you about what we're doing curriculum wise, and we own this process, we're going places. It's happening.
And I can share that with you all in a list. I can send you a copy of that.
Thank you all very much. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent job.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Draper.
teacher.
If there are no other questions, is there a motion to approve the student achievement report as presented?
I move to approve the student achievement report as presented.
Second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we will move on. Thank you again, ladies and Dr. Draper, for that amazing job. We'll move on to item 6.02, the demographic report.
All right, excellent, thank you so much. Very quickly, a couple of things before we get into this. One, there are a couple of reasons why we needed to do this report, as we discussed back in, I think, early summer, June. To go a little bit further, we had, in the early 2000s, lots of conversations about the demography of St. Charles school district boundaries. 2009, there was a major committee set up. Well, there's major decisions made before that. And then in 2009, there was a committee set up. 2012, there was another committee set up. In 2013, we had a demographer service, and then it's kind of just been silent for the last 11 years. So as you will see, there's bond resolution language in here. Before we go out and ask for, hey, let's go out and ask the board to approve some bond resolution language, it's probably good practice, since it's been 11 years, to understand what is happening with the population and with the enrollment, and what are the projections for us in a 10-year period. So that's one of the primary reasons. It actually coincided with CSIP planning as well. And CSIP planning is integral to our 5-year plan, 3 to 5-year plan, for setting goals in our district. And we know that once we get into that planning, some of the people on that committee are very, very passionate about the vision for the district. And we needed some data to help guide that. Not to say this is what we are doing and this is not our game plan, because we will create our game plan. But this gives us a tool to at least go back and refer to when we are stuck in emotions or stuck in opinions. We can at least refer to a third-party report. We're also doing this with a physical needs assessment through our architectural firm that will set some of our priority list as well. So there are multiple data points and multiple data suggestions that we could utilize in order to help us plan for the next 5 to 10 years. And this is just one of those items. And as we get through this, if you wanted to open up the not that one, that's 133 pages. People will light me on fire. All right.
So to that point, the whole report is in there, so you all can look at it, and obviously the public can see it as well. But Jeremy's done a nice job of breaking this down to get a really, just the highlights of exactly what we're talking about a little bit. And again, I want to reiterate what Mr. Shields has already said. For us, this is an important year. That's why we say this year #forward, because we are looking forward, thinking of if we have a CSIP that you guys have been a big part of it. We get our CSIP, we have a demographic study, now we come alongside hopefully the bond issue. Those things should put us right where we need to be, guiding us for the next 3 to 5 years. We're excited about that.
Absolutely.
This is a guide. This is not a, oh, this is what we're doing for sure. And just keep in mind, Jeremy will tell you this too. This study is, again, hundreds of pages, lots of pages, and there are obviously, we're not discussing these things tonight, but there are things in there that we'll talk about. You could do this down the road. We're not taking that as, oh, we have to do those things. It's suggestions, but we're taking the root of the highlighted part of this as a guide for us to move forward. Jeremy?
That's 100% correct. And that's really what this language is telling us here. It's just, we're using this as a guide. And if we start to say, this is what we're doing, based on this outside consultant, this outside demographer, we will make major mistakes. And that basically says as much in this report in a couple of different lines. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide, please. An overview of what it says, 18 square miles, we've heard that quite a bit. We are a small square mileage as far as a district is concerned. Projected population increase of 2,055 people by 2033. You guys know what our school composition is, historical trends. We had a 29% decline between the school years of 97, 98 to 24, 25. That's a 6,504, population of 4,556 students. The largest decline, we've already been hit by it. That was about 1,000 student decline when a lot of those changes were made. And you see current transitions that we have now were based on that 1,000+ student decline in that time period. And then the strongest historical population trend, again, what you're going to see repeatedly through this report is our growing population is a population of 50 years of age or older. So it should increase by 14.3% according to the demographer, and then school age population decreased by 9.4%. So You guys probably see that, you probably experience some of that, you probably understand a lot of that, having lived in St. Charles, for a lot of us for a considerable period of time. So that is not news to a lot of people, but it's also something that's important for us to see, because if you look back at those 2012, 13, 12, and 9 committee, there was thoughts that it was going to quickly shift in like a 5-year period. That has not happened. As a matter of fact, they're continuing, this demographer believes that we can continue to see that for the next 10 years, just at a much slower rate than what we had previously experienced. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, population overview, we got a decline in birth rates. St. Charles should never look at birth rates to set our student enrollment. That's what we know. We know that from 13, and we know that from now. There are so many different places that a person could be born in this region. They're not all born in St. Charles. So knock that out. Childbearing females, I even feel weird saying that. I don't know why I do, but I do. That's what they use in their language. It dropped from...
I had to say that Jeremy, we were getting ready for this presentation, like, Jeremy, you can't say that out loud. Because that's
Now
the
it's good in
term.
my head.
That's what they use, so.
I don't know, for some reason I felt inappropriate how they said it.
Anyway.
Dropped from 11,063 in 1990 to 10,303 in 2020. That doesn't really have any bearing on our student enrollment either. Preschool age children dropped in those 20 years or 30 years as well. But not significantly when you look at a 30-year period. That is not driving our enrollment either. School age children, as you can see, had a noticeable drop during that time frame. Households, though, increased from 18,855 in 1990 to 22,838. And I'll get into this later. So that's an interesting stat for us to look at. And then population increase as well, 48,496 to 53,126 in 2020. So we're seeing some anomalies in what you would typically expect with enrollment. Again, over a 10-year period then, we continue to see the decrease. The under age of 5, we'll see an increase incurred in 2020 to 2023. Pandemic. Yeah. So we saw that happen during that time frame, but we anticipate that decreasing again going back to 2023. 1 of 3 households in St. Charles School District boundaries have no children and are one-person households, and this will remain flat for this period, and that's a significant stat that the demographer found. School-age children increases from 7,489 to 8,223, a 9.8% increase. My question there is, what is our accurate market share to that? Meaning, we're not seeing that many children enter our school enrollment, obviously, and we can get into some of those averages in a little bit, just in another slide, which I'll share about. There's also a statistical dilemma, I guess we could say, because the 2020 census shows our school-age children being a lot lower than that, but a third-party data vendor shows us sitting at that, sitting at the 7489, I believe, right now. So there's a little bit of confusion within the report on that, but it is because of different data that was collected. The number of persons older than 60 years of age will increase about 5.7% in the next 10 years, and that's about 40% of our entire population growth. All right, next slide, please. Again, next 10 years, population growth, 3.7%, going to gain over 2,000 people. The greatest growth is predicted to shift from the center of our district boundaries to the northeast, and that may seem like, oh man, what's going on there? It's not significant. It's not as significant. It won't be noticeable. The population growth inside the district boundaries is 3.7%. It's much lower than the national average of, I want to say, in a 10-year period would be closer to 9%. And then what we're seeing is a typical relationship in the district to added population of new housing and new school enrollment. Population and enrollment ratios are exactly the opposite of what would be expected. And then the summary, no statistical relationship between metro unemployment and employment levels have an impact on our student enrollment. So, and I think this is probably our best example that we could give to you right now is we've had a lot of industrial growth along the 370 corridor, and that did not do a thing to our enrollment, not anything at all. Based on the average commute time, St. Charles is very livable. Housing affordability is growing closer to unaffordable in St. Charles. If you guys have, we've talked about it many times, what our assessed valuation value, what our values have gained in just the last 5 years. Our median income has not kept up with that growth. So we're seeing that teetering right there. And there's a couple of other important stats with that. There's no relationship whatsoever between house sales or new construction to enrollment in our district because of the people family situations that are purchasing them. 25% of the students live in houses built between 61 and 70. So that's going to be some of the houses that you would see that Lindenwood purchased, those types of homes. That's typically where a lot of our students, well, 1/4 of our students are coming from. An increase in home ownership did not correlate with higher enrollment. 51.4% of our houses are houses that students live in are between 150 and 300,000. I thought, I was really intrigued at the 500,000 mark, 16% of our students come from 500,000, but reading a little bit further, that's multifamily units more than likely. They couldn't pinpoint it, but that's what they're assuming is that's more than likely multifamily units. Interesting, in the last 4 years, market interest rates, 29% have bought a house in the last 4 years. We did not see an impact in enrollment. What we believe is happening there are those people that have typically lived in multifamily units, have purchased house, and have just stayed in St. Charles. And the last piece here for us, 5 different projection models were conducted with each one showing a decrease. This projection models for population and enrollment showing a decrease in student enrollment over a 10-year period. One enrollment had us at 4,248. That was the lowest one. The highest one was 4,379. The average was 4,337. That drops us about 220 students over a 10-year period. That is not a significant number for us to get, well, in my opinion now, for us to get radical in our thinking in a lot of different directions. So, but it could create some challenges for us from a financial perspective, obviously. Average would be, that can be on 35 and 37. Other factors that we can consider from this report as we begin to make considerations and make plans, we can't predict economic climates. We can't predict what the federal government is going to do. It's impossible for me to predict what interest rates are going to do. I read reports sent to us by our good friends from Stiefel all the time, and those change sometimes. And then we don't know if we're going to gain students, recover students from the pandemic loss. You will read the St. Louis Post. Regionally, statewide, nationally, public schools are losing students. We saw the same thing from the pandemic of about a 200 student loss. Will that recover at some point in time? All of that's going to be factored back into what's going on with our economy more than likely. And then market share reliability is one thing I wanted to discuss just very briefly with you all. What is the percent of students that we are able, families, that we're able to provide the education that they want in St. Charles City? So we have different market shares reports. The national average is about 14% of district boundaries. Those students will go to public education. Typically, St. Charles, and I imagine this region we're operating between 73 and 75%. The demographer has us now at about 63.5, 64%, meaning he believes that more of our students now are choosing outside, and some of that happened during the pandemic, are choosing homeschool or private education. So when we start talking about CSIP, that is something I would want to really encourage us on, and is to being able to market and improve our marketability to some of those families that are living within our district boundaries already. And again, that number, we don't quite know what that is. We don't know which number you can trust necessarily, from that 7,500 number all the way up to the 8,500 number that they could anticipate by 2033. But if we're using if that number becomes true in 2033, 34, and it is at 8,500, and we get to 75%, you would be looking at 5,000 plus students enrolled back in our district again. Far-fetched perhaps, but you never know, right? So that's the summary of 133 pages. So I certainly didn't touch everything. I just tried to highlight what I thought was the most important.
I have a quick question. So were you saying, I know we don't know for sure the number, but parochial or homeschool, about 35%, we think?
That's what the demographer believes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah. Within our district boundaries. So it could be private parochial, but it could be homeschool.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that a trend, do they know, is that looking like overall county-wise as well, or is that just, I mean, not specifically for us, but have we seen, has the other schools seen that same?
I don't know the answer to that. The demographer only focused on the St. Charles School District boundaries.
But compared, and you probably know this, I'm probably saying something obvious, but if you look at the St. Louis region compared to the state, the amount of parochial / private school institutions, I mean, the concentration is right here in the St. Louis area, the region. It's definitely a factor for all public schools in this area, in this region. So I'm not answering your question specifically because I don't know those numbers, but I'd venture to guess that it's something for all of us, that all the schools, not this side of the river and in St. Louis County, that it's a factor in this area for sure.
We didn't see a significant decline in any one grade level. If you think of your transitions a lot in the last 5 years of cohort groups and following them, you didn't see a significant decline like when they were leaving the elementaries and going into a transition year. But we did see an uptick of over 4% going into high school. You did see that increase. People probably perhaps leaving some of those institutions and entering our public high schools.
A lot of them are closing though. I mean, we've had some close in our school district,
Right.
St. Peter and, and I know the grade schools my family went to, they're closed, they're all closed.
I
So,
noticed
and their enrollment's down.
yeah, they missed Academy of the Sacred Heart.
And that's my fault, because I didn't tell them to look at that one.
Okay.
So that's my fault. I see it out of my window every day, and for whatever reason, I didn't tell them.
Well, and the demographer tended to say that low enrollment would be bad news for the district and high enrollment would be good news. And I don't see it that way because 75% of our funding is local and not based on enrollment or WADA or whatever.
Right.
So we wouldn't be missing much funding if our enrollment drops.
And it wasn't such a staggering drop. I mean, I think
Right,
that's
yeah,
important.
yeah.
Like, if they would have said, you expect another 1,000 student drop in the next 10 years, that's going to catch our attention very quickly.
When I was talking about facility usage and such, is there anything that was really taken into consideration for like our transitions or space or anything else?
No, he didn't. He did not take any considerations into that. He knew what our transitions were, but didn't emphasize in the report that I could find.
Not to get dark, but with the aging population, is there a possibility of that, I guess, statistic changing with younger families, I guess?
It's a great question, and one
I'm trying to preface it.
It's an intriguing question because,
In the next 30 years.
What's the next generation of home buyers looking?
So way better way.
Are they looking for 4,000 plus square feet? If so, that trend will continue to find cheaper 4,000 square foot houses somewhere other than St. Charles. But if that new generation says, I want lower costs, different type of home ownership, lower taxes, lower upkeep, then perhaps that trend reverses, and that's not an expected trend of a reversal of that trend.
Because right now, when you see some of this, you think Sanford Farms and the other big subdivisions coming on the north end, those two big properties, but then they really haven't done a whole lot for us. It just really haven't.
Yeah, you're looking at $500,000 plus homes. So if we had any families moving in there, our assumptions would be they are already in a school situation that probably is not St. Charles.
And then on the other flip side, we've seen a lot of development from the city, we've talked about apartments, different things, and that's not affecting us a whole lot either, so.
So thrilling 133 pages. Thank you for summarizing it very, very well. Appreciate you.
Any other questions? Okay, there's no vote on this. This was just primarily for information and discussion. So thank you, Mr. Shields, for making it a little more concise for all of us. We'll move on to item 7.01, election resolution.
All right, excellent. So we've got Jason Terry from Gilmore Bell with us here to help guide us possibly on some election language that we're proposing today for your approval. Looking at doing a $90 million bond, a sale in 25 and 28, splitting that at 45 and 45 million. This would not be a rate increase for our taxpayers. And a lot of people will say, well, is that necessary? Is that needed, right? And I'll say this is normal business for school districts. So to give you a comparison to St. Charles County schools, Orchard Farm has this set at $1. Winsville has theirs set at 93. I know it's one of these numbers. Francis Howell is at like 67 cents. Dumolt's at like 68 cents. We're wanting to maintain ours at 75 cents. I believe we started this a little over 10 years ago of having it set at 75 cents, and it was chosen as that because we felt like that was the most necessary amount for the buildings that we have and the needs that we would need to keep them up to date and to keep them operational without interruptions from day to day issues because of a lack of control with our facilities. So we are looking at 90, no tax increase, tax rate increase, let me say it that way. And then a lot of the work that's going to be done with this one is not work that you're going to look at and say, my gosh, I can't wait to see that new roof. Okay? I can't wait to see those rooftop unit HVAC units. I can't wait to see the new copper piping inside the school building. But those are the infrastructure repairs that we're certainly going to need. In addition to, there's language in here about vehicles. We have an aging bus fleet. That aging bus fleet, it's very expensive to maintain.
Very expensive.
Yeah, and it's growing expenses. So possibly utilizing some of the money for purchasing of that. In addition to some of our water lines, that's not in the report that we have through our architects right now, but we would need to upgrade some of those, especially on that west side of the campus, Zumbell, up to Jefferson, and that's a big one there that we're going to have to address at some point in time. So if you look in our architect plan, we still have a lot of spending needs, but if you look at two specific facilities in their report, St. Charles West and Jefferson are in high need, not only of some the infrastructure repairs, but also the aesthetic repairs, or aesthetic renovations that are much necessary in each one of those. So I don't know if you have any questions on that other than what I've just explained here, but it is 90, it is a no tax rate increase, and it does keep us at 75 cents. It allows us to be well below the allowable debt limit of 218 million, I believe is what it is.
That's really important.
Yeah, that's a big one, and no tax. So we're doing this one as a twofold, 25, 28 compared to the last one.
Right.
Overall number, if we just did it as one comparison, like for our last bond issue.
So you're asking like if we were just to do one, we'd probably be looking at the 45, but then going back out in 4 years for another similar number. I can't say exactly what that would be, but
This gives us more time.
sure. Yeah, it would be a lot more fluid in construction, in my opinion.
Sure. And hopefully it's not in the middle of another.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, as we're developing the CSIP plan, and a big part of that now, because you're a part of that third, one of those three pillars is resources. What is that going to look like? And then just to remind everybody, typically what we've done before is and the principals are a big part of this, we would have focus groups come in and talk about what we would like in these buildings. We're at some point in these buildings now, we have to get very strategic, especially about some of this infrastructure, things that we have to do. So the neat thing about, and we've already talked about this, I just want to remind you all in other board meetings that our architect firm has come through with this basically data software that our principals were a part of, that now we have a pretty good comprehensive, it's not a plan like this is exactly what we're doing, but a guide of exactly what we need to do for these buildings, all of this data. Go ahead.
Use this guide here to set our priorities. So, I mean, it's as comprehensive as you want it to be, in my opinion, but from here, we begin to establish priorities.
And that's a game changer there to have that.
And we haven't had this previously, and it's something that we're allowed to update as we renovate and as we improve everything, model number of, water heaters, to our rooftop units that are $200,000 rooftop units are in this, not in this specific report, but are in our architect's hands.
With the new CSIP 3 to 5 year plan, you want to be able to have the capacity to get to where you need to go. So, yeah.
Would you explain the 45 split again? You explained it too quickly for me.
I'm sorry. So in 2020, if this is approved by the board, and then by the voters in April, we would have $45 million to spend in construction starting in 2025. And then we would spend that out. We hope to spend that out in 3 to 4 years. And then we would have another sale in 2028, a release another $45 million. So I think, and Mr. Terry can get into that detail a little bit more. I would hope for it to be spent in 7 to 9 years.
Yeah, and I said 3 to 5, it's really 7 to 9, and that gives us a really good opportunity to get everything done we need to get done.
But one vote.
One vote.
One vote.
I mean, especially with our older schools always needing some updates and stuff, but I mean, going through the schools we went through this week and hearing from some of the attendees with us too, the comments around how beautiful the school is and how we maintain them and how we keep them up to date is because of things like this.
But Jeremy's correct. When we get to this list, just be ready, because you obviously look for things to say, hey, look what you're gonna see. A lot of this people might not recognize or see just because there's a lot of infrastructure, roofing, like you said, different things. So,
Yeah, I wanted to be a part of
it's
the
important.
project where people, celebrate.
Yeah.
There's not a personal statue of you out front of central office or
Not
something.
gonna get it.
Not gonna get it.
How many years ago?
Plaques.
We have 40 of our buses are 2017s.
And we are 10-year on those?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what we would like to run, but right now, with the maintenance costs of some of those, we're getting it, yeah,
How many total buses do we have?
50. A little over 50.
And 40 of them coming in.
Are we looking at any electric vehicles?
We haven't yet, because it would take a lot of stations to power. But I'm not saying it's not something we would consider, but we just have not yet.
There's also propane, but we have not looked at that either.
We probably will start looking at this if this is approved this evening, in order to be ready to begin writing an RFP to see what we might be able to get back, in numbers wise.
And if you approve it, obviously, when we get back from break, we will be ready to rock and roll on the promotion and campaign of it. That person back there is gonna be a big part of that, right, Mickey?
More than you want me to be.
She's ready.
Any other questions? No? If not, is there a motion to approve the election resolution as presented?
I move we approve the election resolution as presented.
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to item 7.02
So,
as well. Back to Mr. Shu.
What we're asking for is, so one of the outcomes of an increased assessed valuation that is much greater growth than you could have ever have anticipated is an increase in our debt service money. So we're running several $1 million more than what we could have anticipated because of that increase in the assessed valuation over the last few years. So rather than letting that money sit, we would ask for you to approve for us to be able to take $2 million and pay the 2017 bond off a little bit early, that $2 million off early anyhow. So that's really what we're asking to do here. And this is not an infrequent thing for school districts when you're running bond money. It won't be infrequent during these time periods either for people to have defeasance issues.
Was there anything else we could use that $2 million for instead?
Only pay off debt, yeah.
That's a good question, but.
Nice try. Even if we invest it, we have to pay back the gains on that investment to a certain percentage. And that's where the experts come in and they tell us what we have to pay back.
Tell us what we have to pay.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Not, is there a motion to approve the defeasance resolution as presented?
I move to approve the defeasance resolution as presented.
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Can we thank
Yes.
Jason and Lorenzo for being here tonight? They're great partners of ours,
Yep.
and I tell you, I've been doing this long enough that you can't do this without great partners and people who know what they're doing in this field. No, I'm serious, they're phenomenal people. So thank you, gentlemen, for all that you do. Jeremy, did you want to add anything?
Well,
to
I
that?
was gonna say, third year in this position, you know, and without their guidance, I'd be hurting.
Great partnership.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Thank you guys
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank you for staying too.
Yes.
It was a long one, so.
Well, great job, Mayor. This first time I didn't have to speak.
Do you want to say, we were trying to say?
Oh, no.
Thank you both.
Everyone knows I'm really shy.
Yeah, Lorenzo, thank you, Jason, thank you.
Thanks, you guys. We will move on to item 7.03, the 2023-24 audit review.
Come on, Jeremy, keep going.
You're on a roll, you're on a roll.
So exciting. All right, the audit. So this is always the most nerve-wracking, and it's always like, did I do something wrong? Did we do something wrong? Are they gonna find anything, you know? So even though you're not intentionally trying to, I know that some of you have been a part of audits in your own work life, it always raises a little concern, a little fear factor with that. And so thankfully, if we were to open it, I don't want to read it to you because again, it's another long report. But the first page essentially will tell you that we are an unmodified audit, which is the best score that you can receive in an audit. So a couple of things with that. If you worry, you want to take notes when you write this down and go back and look at it. The first page does say it's an unmodified report, but by the time you get to pages 4 through 21, that's really our financial statements. So 4 through 21 are the financial statements, and page 8 shows that we did, in fact, end with a healthy fund balance. So that's good news. It's always good when the auditor agrees with what we believe. So fund balance being at $22,993,962. That's where we landed. We should see that always growing a little bit because it costs us more every year, especially with this inflation period that we've got, which is growing back again, unfortunately. So that's important. Increases are noted in the general fund and in our debt service. The increase in debt service you saw was $2.2 million last year. That's where that $2 million comes from that we're wanting to pay off early because that was another gain on our end. Decrease in capital fund, that's not anything to be concerned about. That just means we're spending the construction money. We're spending the bond money. That's all that's saying. Pages 10 and 11 are new to an audit this year. So what we're trying to do, we've set up what we call a proprietary fund for our insurance. So we wanted to be able to show without concern how did our insurance fund perform in that previous year. And it's a school year, so it's kind of mixed. Like our insurance runs a calendar year, so half of it ran off of one insurance and the other half January to July ran off of a new one. So that was to the tune of 472,910 during that year of a gain, and that's the first gain that we'd had in 3 years. So that's a little bit easier for me to handle than what we previously had. So again, 11 shows that same thing, and that's a proprietary fund. We're rolling that into that function now. Outside of that, I'm sure I hit everything. Page 13 just shows that internal service fund. That's new. That's, again, the self-insurance. And then pages 22 through 23 are just our federal expenditures report. Again, that was unmodified as well. So it's a clean opinion all the way through page 38 and through the state reporting revenues. That's all unmodified also. So the one thing that we've got on here, and this auditor likes us to include management comments, so we certainly do. It's not an issue for us to include those. But there are 3 management comments. They call them control deficiencies. And I can explain each one. The first one was, and we've talked about this, as a matter of fact, you guys approved an adjustment this past November, where we get to the year end and we know how we have to take money from Fund 1 to not make Fund 2 negative. We didn't explicitly state that, which is why we had to explicitly state that in November. I said it, but he wants a report drafted and drawn to meet the statute requirement. That's one part to that. The other part is we should always have a line item in the original budget that shows that we're going to make some transfer from that Fund 1 to cover that Fund 2. Ironically, I was talking back when we were developing this budget, I shouldn't say ironically because she just said do it. The Director of Business and Accounting, Jennifer Jenkins, said, you need to include that line item. I said, okay. And then this came out and I'm like, I'm so glad we have that as the line item in there because I was unaware of that aspect. But that's a recommendation to go ahead and put it in two places. You can have it in one of each. It's just good practice to put it in the budget, the original budget, and then also show it explicitly in June. So you guys will see that adjustment in June. So that's that correction. The second one was we had a bus breakdown, and it was one of our buses that transported our kids with high needs. It broke down, so we had to supplement a different bus for that. That wasn't, that bus for a 2-week period wasn't reported to the state. So we basically lost 2 weeks worth of revenue from the state on transporting those kids until the auditor saw that. And then, so he said, make sure you get your schedule of statistics with buses correct, essentially. So that's what that management control is on. Now, I will say, what we're trying to do is everything's going electronic with that. Right now, our bus drivers just pencil everything. Mileage and student riders. We're trying to get our system set up. We have the equipment to where everything is going to be electronically based and we're just pulling data reports at that point. Right now, we are fairly archaic. We're still doing it by hand. So I think that will help. And then the third one was a free and reduced lunch application that wasn't correct to his standards, the auditor standards. The reason why it was correct for our standards, we explained this, didn't matter. But the reason it was correct for our standards was we had the documentation from the parent to show to the state, but we did not show that documentation to the auditor. So we just need to make sure we give them everything moving forward, and that includes the additional documentation that parents do not meet that qualification. We've got to give them additional documentation to prove that that person is in fact free and reduced. Because there are different things that parents have to prove from time to time. So that's probably the major components of the audit. Again, unmodified report, we're pleased with that. But I will also tell the business team that we're glad when they find these things because it's only going to make us better.
Well, kudos to our business team, led by Jenny Jenkins. Jeremy's done a great job with that as well. And, as a few of you I could see when we talked about those three things, it's very fine-tooth comb. But I'm very proud of this audit report, and that, you know, if you see the news lately, for us to have the audit, it is I'm very proud of the way we do business here and our books and our auditing and kudos to our team. And then our instruction team, I mean, we got great people doing great work and we do it the right way. Chairman's done a great job tonight with all these reports, so excellent job, Mr. Shields. Kudos to Dr. Draper tonight for his report as well. But any questions on that? Sorry,
Any questions?
Literally one. Literally one for the free and reduced lunches that they got for, that's fun. I know from last year, we had a couple of things that were around the same area. None of these are repeated from that. So
We
just
didn't
showing-
have any repeats. The biggest one we had was, and that carried for like 2 years, was too much control, responsibility on our director. And essentially what that means, it doesn't mean that they were doing too much, but they had too much access. So eliminating that access and proving that is no longer there was important. And we would have to show, like, a lot of it was just signed documentation. So I was signing off reconciliation reports, I was signing off on check batches and things of that nature. So just proving that we had that process in place, which before, like, that looks good, but I wasn't signing, so, or somebody wasn't signing, may not have been me, but.
Checks and balances.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the 23-24 audit review as presented?
I make a motion to approve the audit review as presented.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That is approved. And last but not least, item 8.01, the district financial report. Yep, gonna bring it home.
So what's great is I just told you that our fund balance was healthy. And our December payroll shows us that it's healthy because we were able to meet it, right? Our first release from the county was today of a little over $4 million. We actually had a revenue of $1.7 million from the county in November, and we also got in some federal revenue in November. So we're completely fine as we go through December. All of that revenue is now being brought into us. We'll get another payment next Wednesday. I believe it will be a fairly decent chunk of money, and then we'll probably receive, it's probably this year going to be like a 40-60 split. 40% of our money will come in December, 60% in January. At least that's what we're hearing. So that's all looking fine and dandy. Spending is right where we want it to be in comparison to our budget and previous years. So that is nice. We're able to make some adjustments because of some additional revenue sources that we had come in to our maintenance, what you'll see up there. And then we had to update our ESSER 3 expenditure because of how some of the things hit the book. So big items for us on this, probably what we're always looking at is what will the final report be in February for our local tax dollars? So as this money's coming in, how did it compare to what we budgeted for back in May, before true figures were out? So we'll be looking at that, obviously, making sure that's intact. And then the other piece is how we do have a cash flow analysis. So basically, what are our lowest amounts each month that we need to keep in the bank, because the rest then we're able to invest. That's what we're looking at doing, and we feel like we have a pretty good handle on that, so we can try to generate that additional revenue that we've been trying to create. And I think as long as the interest rates stay where they are, the federal government at one point was saying five cuts in 2025. Now we may only have 2, and that's even if that's going to happen. That just means bad for us, but great for our investments in the district. So we'll be looking at that and trying to manage that the best that we can. We did a really good job of that last year with MOCAT support, and that's one of the firm that we invest with, or helps us invest.
Just for the sake of our residents, taxpayers, I've been reading the paper a lot, and we won't name names, but one of the issues was credit card distribution. That seems to have been a big problem. I'm assuming when you look at this visa bill, this is the total number of people in our district who have access to credit cards, and that somebody is reviewing that monthly, those charges.
Yeah. We
Because that
absolutely do.
was the
And
big issue.
That's an excellent point, so I wanna comment on that now that you opened it up with that. I love it that you opened it up with that. Because one of the things that we've done in the last year was we've reduced our monthly transaction limits and we've reduced our daily spend limits for teachers, specifically, for everyone. I don't even have an open card. I don't carry an open card. So I just tell people, I have to go and ask people to open my card before I can spend. Historically, that's not been the case in St. Charles. So we are going to have a tough time with teachers once we start restricting that more. That first piece that we did, changing those daily limits, changing those transaction limits, and getting them in a much better place because it was out of control. I'm going to be completely honest. The most difficult piece I'm going to have now is to change the spending habits of people that are used to just saying, I just use my card to go out. I'm not saying that this has happened. Play materials, because I recognize that we needed these three things. So changing that behavior, changing that habit will be difficult, and I will get criticized heavily once I do it. But that is a goal of mine, and I've not said that until right now, but I'm grateful that you brought that up because it's a concern.
Can I ask you a question, Jeremy?
Yes.
Does that include somebody with their own account? That their department, are their departments putting their own money into their account and they're not taking anything from the district?
Oh, you're talking about for student activity money? Ironically, that would include that, from my opinion, because the greatest area of fraud will occur in student activity money. And I'm not saying our people are doing it. I'm not saying that's the case at all. But that's our greatest concern. If we don't have great controls on that, we're opening ourselves up for that one bad actor that might potentially misuse.
I'll just ask you something if there was a case.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm not saying it's happening in town. I'm just saying that once I start going down that route, there's potential. It'll cause some problems. Yeah.
There's so many spend one time a year.
I think it's just a good conversation to have, right? Because when we implement things and have to, sometimes, and it's our job, we understand, but why are we doing this? Because of this, we gotta make sure that it's all in line. And that we're leading and guiding and making sure that we're putting the right protocols in place. We do trust our people, we've got great people, but institutionally, we're gonna make sure we're all in line, so. That includes us too, all of us, so it's very important.
Any other questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the financial report as presented?
Make a motion, we approve the financial report as reported.
Second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item 9.01, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.